How's time going?
Good afternoon, welcome to the UK Column Live. It's the 20th of December 2012 and it's just gone 2 o'clock. We're live over the UK Column website and on TNS. Myself and Brian Gerrish are here today. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
The big question, Brian, what's the weather doing?
Well, there's some quite shocking news on the weather. We'll just bring up our weather prediction for the next few days. And what happened there? Well, here we are, the 5-day weather forecast, and I'm very sad to tell you that basically the trouble starts tomorrow. We can expect extreme temperatures of nearly 1,000 degrees, some fire and brimstone, and of course this fits the prediction for tomorrow being the end of the world. So
according to the Mayans,
the weather we believe is going to be violent and unpredictable, so basically no change from the normal weather for Plymouth.
Thank you to James as
For
well.
those of you of a serious nature, the weather which we have just shown you, the forecast, is of course a bit of a light-hearted joke. We know that there are some people that hang on every word from UK Column Live, and we wouldn't like you to be put off by that extreme weather forecast.
Thank you to James as well for
producing that.
Well
done,
for
James.
Well done, James.
Well,
who's going to start today? Oh,
well,
me.
It looks as though it's you with,
Yep.
with Mr. Obama.
Mr. Obama's been telling Cameron that Britain should stay in the European Union. He's warned us, actually, and apparently the White House is thought to be concerned that Britain would lose clout on the world stage if it was no longer part of the Euro bloc. It could also harm the special relationship if London was no longer seen as an ally able to wield in the influence across Europe. They had a nice, cosy couple of hours telephone conversation yesterday.
Yeah, we've got a picture of that, actually.
Lovely.
Oh, my goodness, we're having fun. Sorry about that. We've gone back to the weather.
Yeah, there they are.
There they are, in their cosy.
Yeah, and apparently Washington's thought to be increasingly concerned about what it's seen as Britain inching towards full-scale withdrawal from the EU. And of course, Mr. Blair has got to have a mention. He's also revealed the anxiety in the United States and around the world at the prospect of Britain quitting the EU.
It's incredible, isn't it? Just before we discuss the serious things, I was looking at the picture of Mr. Obama there on the right. That is Mr. Obama on the right, just in case there's any confusion. And if you notice, he is so enthralled with his telephone conversation with Mr. Cameron that on his lap he's just playing a game on his mobile phone. And I think this probably reflects the true state of the relationship between these two. Of course, David Cameron presides over a country which he's busy destroying at the moment, and whose armed forces, with great respect to guests on the show coming up, are being cut to the bone. Meanwhile, of course, America, unbelievably powerful in in a military sense.
Mr. Cameron also looked like he needed to get a cleaner there as well. Tidy up a bit behind him.
Absolutely. I don't know whether that's an iron on his desk. But the key thing is that Obama is not telling the American nation anything in detail about what's proposed for the breakup of America into regions, or the real truth about the North American Union. So while he's dragging America into a union by stealth, of course, Cameron is doing exactly the same thing here. So really, I think we're only seeing a puppet show as to the fact that UK may leave the European Union. What Mr. Cameron is doing behind closed doors is making sure we're buried as deeply as possible inside it. Mike, you...
I would just suggest that perhaps the relationship is quite the opposite than the one that's being presented, that Obama is taking orders. This has been going on for quite a number of years now, the idea that America gives Britain orders. I think it's quite the opposite.
And your basis for this is control through the real powerhouse, the City of London, and through the international money markets.
Indeed.
Yeah. Well, whatever's going on between these two guys, if this is a genuine photograph either end of the telephone conversation, then clearly Mr. Obama was bored with his instructions. But we'll watch. So we've got a picture of a warship here, which was nice to see, a Russian warship in an Iranian port, and I think this is one of your topics. We've just lost that slide for some reason.
Yeah, I'm having...
It's the end of the year, Mike, and the end of the world tomorrow, so we're not going to worry too much.
Just having slight technical problems on the video front with the switching, but anyway, well...
It's gone again.
Yeah, okay. Basically, this is a report in the Tehran Times that the Russian destroyer Marshal now I'm going to get this name wrong probably, it's Shapozhnikov, I hope I got that right, has docked in a port in Iran, and the Iranian military are saying that this is in order to strengthen military relations between Iran and Russia. And, you know, this, I think, has got to be seen in the context of what's going on in the Middle East in general. And we're seeing definite battle lines, if you want to use that phrase, being drawn up. You know, if we take a little bit of the sort of history of this, this was from October. And this was Leon Panetta, the Defense Secretary, in front of a Senate committee. We mentioned this yesterday, and he was basically proudly acknowledging that whatever America does militarily, it's on the orders of international groups and not on the orders of Congress. And you know, this caused jaws to drop in the Senate committee among some of the senators that were questioning him, so we've got that situation. As I mentioned also yesterday, there was a press conference held. It hadn't happened by the time we talked about it, so we can talk about it now. Walter Jones, who I mistakenly said was Democrat yesterday, just correct that, he's a Republican congressman. He actually has a bill in the Congress pointing out that if Obama attempts to go to war without congressional approval, that is an impeachable offence. And so that's really what this press conference yesterday was about. He and some it was basically a cross-party coalition of congressmen had sent Obama a letter reminding him that this was an impeachable offence, and really he shouldn't be messing about with sending troops to places without the authority of Congress. Now, on top of that, then we have Russia. Apparently, this is Debka file. Now, we know from Patrick and others that Debka files shouldn't necessarily be relied upon to be a reliable source. It is an Israeli media outlet, which Patrick believes is quite closely linked to Israeli intelligence services, but basically they're promoting they're suggesting that the Russians have in fact provided Assad with cruise missiles. So again, we've now got Russians getting involved with Iran, getting closer to Iran militarily. We've got Russians getting closer to Assad militarily. So this seems to be, we've got NATO providing the missile defences in Turkey, and also rumours of it happening in Jordan as well. So you know, battle lines are being drawn up, and in fact, I think I got my slides in the wrong order because you know, if we consider the Walter Jones issue in holding the president to account in America. Here we've got the Foreign Affairs Committee. This is a letter that they sent yesterday to William Hague, basically, you know, saying to Hague, what are you doing? Potentially sending British troops into the Middle East without checking with Parliament first. And the last paragraph is quite interesting, because he says, can you confirm that should the government propose to provide military support to the opposition in Syria, Parliament will have due notice and time to debate such action in the House. Now, we know that in a number of military actions in the recent past, Parliament has not been consulted, and this seems to be the first sign of any institution within Parliament actually saying that's not really appropriate. So we've got the same kind of situation happening in the States and over here, while in the meantime we've got other nations, Russia in particular, getting involved with, much closer involved militarily with the countries that we seem to be intending to battle against or invade.
Well, you've given us a good summary on that, and I'm surprised that you've been quite as polite as you have, because it seems to me that really what we're seeing is the fact that we have MPs, I'm going to say senior MPs, in fact we have the British Prime Minister out of control, because he now assumes that he's got the power to simply take this country into war or to attack another nation state simply on his own say-so. And of course this was the psychopathic political characteristic of Blair, carried through by Gordon Brown, of course. And so we're seeing this same, I think it's a psychopathic thing. These people have an ego which is so big they don't think they even need the rest of the democratically elected system to debate whether a country and its military should be deployed overseas. Well, it's a very dangerous situation.
Absolutely, and just to correct my politeness slightly, I mean, I don't think it can be overstated how dangerous this situation is. We are looking at a very serious situation where we're not talking about just regime change in countries, but we're actually talking about Britain and the United States going up against Russia directly, and we've got to remember that this is the result of policy, and so this is what I'm really saying here is the people that are pushing this insane policy either have to be removed by whatever means. We've got to get them out of the positions that they're in where they can impose this policy, but we've got to get this policy changed or we're going to find ourselves in a difficult situation.
Absolutely, but on a positive note, through this letter, through this committee, we are seeing at least some British politicians beginning to ask the right question. So we're going to encourage them to keep doing that. So on the troubled subject of the Middle East, we've got a Russian Today.
Yeah, Russia Today have picked up, well, Human Rights Watch actually has picked up that Israel has violated the laws of war by targeting the media targets over in Gaza. Palestinian firefighters tried to extinguish a fire after an Israeli strike witnessed by a journalist on a floor building that also houses international media offices in Gaza. This was back in November. The army attacks on journalists and media centres throughout Gaza during last month's military operation violated all the laws of war, according to Human Rights Watch. 2 Palestinian cameramen were killed, 10 media personnel were wounded during the conflict, 4 media facilities and 4 private companies were also damaged. But the Israeli government said that they were military targets, where Human Rights Watch have come out and now said no, that they knew all along that they weren't. They weren't, and that they were media buildings, and well, that's it really. Human Rights Watch have picked up on this and the lying of the Israeli government.
Yeah. Well, on the subject of what is done and how it's done, this is an interesting article from the Daily Express, which is pointing out that France has been hosting secret meetings with the Taliban, and this is apparently getting Afghan officials to meet the Taliban rebels and envoys from other Islamist militant group near Paris. And the aim is that these people are looking to see what the future's going to be in Afghanistan after international forces have returned home. And I'd simply point out that this is fascinating that France, who of course has put minimal commitment into Afghanistan, not that we would approve the action there at all anyway, but whilst American and British troops have taken the brunt of the work in Afghanistan, we now see France manoeuvring in the shadows in order to sort out the future. For me, it was interesting because, of course, David Cameron was bringing the whole of Britain's strategic defence review based on meetings, secret meetings that were held at the residence of the British ambassador in Paris, facilitated by a charity, the Franco-British Council. So I'm going to say that UK Column Live team are quite suspicious that actually these so-called secret French meetings will be more of the same, so unelected people meeting in rooms behind closed doors to decide policy, which is not actually debated in a democratic place, or Westminster, of course, for us. So we'll watch that carefully and report further. A change of subject here. This is really for Malcolm, Malcolm Massey, who's with us and normally talks on matters to do with agriculture. And somebody was kind enough to call in and point out that basically the Unite has accused the government of another cowardly attack on working people with the news that the Agricultural Wages Board, that protects wages for over 140,000 agricultural workers in England and Wales, is to be scrapped. And the point of this is that, the suggestion is that the protection that a large number of agricultural workers, who of course exist generally speaking on very, very low wages, by 2013 we're going to have removed yet another layer of protection for those people. And here we see David Cameron's vicious Big Society programme now is really speeding up, and we are going to have 140,000 more people probably on just about breadline wages are now being exposed to the possibility of being made redundant, or we get rid of them with no problem.
Just while we're talking about this, somebody in the chat box has just given some interesting information. Apparently on the 14th of December this year, the EU health claims register came into force. All health claims on foods and ingredients that haven't been accused by the European Food Standards Authority is now illegal.
Approved by the
they're illegal.
Right. Just read that again.
Right, this is from Paul. Friday the 14th of December 2012 is the day that the EU Health Claims Register comes into force. From this day, all health claims on foods and ingredients that haven't been approved by the European Food Safety Authority become illegal.
Right. Well,
we will check that out.
We'll check it out, and thank you very much for sending that in. And of course, there is a major event in our lives which doesn't seem to be covered by the mainstream press at all. It's quite incredible.
Yeah.
Another Express article here on the topic of immigration. We've been very, very interested at the reaction by people since we've started to speak over immigration, and I'm pleased to say that the overwhelming majority of comments coming into UK Column Live are very even-handed and balanced, and I think the main thing is common sense.
Yep.
This article here is supposedly commenting on the anger expressed over the hidden 200,000 migrants who slip into Britain. But what's absolutely fascinating when you read the article is that there is no concern about the fact that Britain has now totally lost control of its borders. We've got massive cuts throughout the public sector. We can't repair the roads, we can't run our hospitals, we can't run schools properly, we can't look after the sick, we can't pay people benefits. But we have more and more people coming into the country. This is not a question of race or religion. This is simple common sense. But when we look at the analysis in the Express article, they're not talking about common sense. They're quoting councils such as Kensington and Chelsea Council and Southwark, who are busy squealing about the fact that if we don't know these people are there, they can't claim money. So the whole issue of people is seen in the eyes of the council to do with what that does to their budgets. Meanwhile, the common sense thing is can we cope with this number of people? Nobody will deal with this topic. And of course, this is the cross-party agenda. Lib Dem, Conservative and Labour is to simply not talk about the subject, but allow the pressure to build up an impact on all communities. And I'm going to stress all communities because we know perfectly well from some of the ethnic minority communities in this country that they are now also beginning to suffer due to the pressure of this influx of people. Where is the common sense? Don't know. And we're giving the Express a little bit of a day today, actually, but then it has been the Mail. Putin backing the bid to ban US adoptions, and this is a fascinating little article where President Vladimir Putin says a bid to ban US adoptions of Russian children is a legitimate response to a new American law calling for sanctions on Russian human rights violations. Now, isn't this incredible? Because essentially we're using children as a weapon.
Yeah.
And whilst we've been quite supportive of Mr. Putin over a number of issues, the fact that he will use the children as an issue, he's not looking at whether these children are going to good homes, although he does actually later on say that it's clear that children are going to adoptive homes in America and their welfare is not being guaranteed. But here we see children effectively being used as a bargaining chip between two major powers. It's a very cynical way of looking at politics. And on the subject of cynicism, of course, we must introduce David Cameron, who has vowed new online porn curbs. Now, of course, Mr. Cameron is well known for his deeply penetrating intellect, so I thought it would be interesting to have a look at what he said about the subject of online porn. Here he is. He vowed to act against a silent attack on innocence and shield children from the worries and complexities of adulthood. And this is, of course, Mr. Cameron, whose educational policies are bringing ever deeper and more unpleasant sexualisation of young children into the classrooms.
So teaching kids as young as 6 about it as well.
Absolutely. So sheer hypocrisy from David Cameron, which of course is all that UK Column Live expects. But if we look at a couple of his other amazing quotes on this subject, he says, an option of having default-on filters for new computers was not suitable, Prime Minister said, as this led to the blocking of too wide a range of websites. Mr. Cameron said, this is a kind of default-on for houses with children. It's just that it adds much more control for parents about exactly what is restricted. No. Now, I don't quite understand what Mr. Cameron is saying, because I don't think he knows what he's saying. But the impact of this is, of course, that we can't get rid of pornography from the internet. We throw the problem back at the parents, and even if they can put the controls on computers in their own houses, they have no control when their children move to other locations.
And a lot of the things that you have to for the online protection for kids, you've got to pay for anyway. It's not like a free...
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll just add to that, because, of course, Mr. Cameron had more to say. He added, let me reiterate the key points with our new system. Every parent will be prompted to protect their children online. If they don't make choices, protection will automatically be on. So David Cameron here is absolutely supporting huge global companies like Google, who are, of course, facilitating the massive increase in available pornography to adults and, of course, children. And we've covered this in the last few days, but we think in light of this statement by Mr. Cameron, we need to show it again. So here is David Cameron, looking very fresh-faced on board a very smart aircraft. And, of course, he's with Steve Hilton. And who is Mr. Hilton married to? Well, he's married to Rachel Whetstone, the high-powered communications chief for Google. She and Hilton have 2 children and are godparents to David Cameron's late eldest son, Ivan. So if we think that's only skin deep, then of course we come back to this, where this lady, Rachel Whetstone, was intimately connected with the Tory party as chief of staff to Michael Howard. So is it really any wonder that basically David Cameron is simply bowing to the fact that Google doesn't want to lose its massive profits from pornography? And Cameron has flagged up this lady, MP Claire Perry. She's going to be in charge of preventing the sexualisation and commercialisation of childhood. And yeah?
Sorry?
Shall I read that again?
Yes, please.
Today, the Prime Minister has announced that Claire will become his advisor on preventing the sexualisation and commercialisation of childhood.
The commercialisation?
Well, of course, we've already shown in talks, supported, of course, by evidence, as an example, that when she was Minister for Children, Sarah Tether had marketing and commercial aspects of children in her role as Minister. And of course, one of the things she was doing was awarding contracts to private companies in order to take over care of children. I'll just bring the quote up again, because people might like to see it, so that we really understand what it is. If Mike can just call it. There we are. I'm absolutely delighted that the Prime Minister has asked me to be his advisor on preventing the commercialisation and sexualisation of children. I'm very much looking forward to helping the government introduce more robust filters for internet content in our home. She's actually talking, I think, about censorship of free media. Working to improve age rating information on music videos, helping to improve education for parents and children about online safety, and making sure that the other excellent recommendations of the Bailey report are implemented. So she's quite a lady. So we thought we'd have a little look at her, and this is her background: Oxford University, Bank of America, Harvard Business School, McKinsey & Company, Credit Suisse, helper to George Osborne. So this little girl is obviously a student of the big banking industry and friend to George Cameron. Then she gets promoted. And
George Osborne even.
George Osborne, sorry, George Osborne. And if you haven't had a look, do have a look at McKinsey & Company, because they are dealing in education to employment. So here we've got a massive corporation that's going to tell us how to educate our children and deal with them. But they say that McKinsey & Company is a global management consulting firm. We are the trusted advisor to the world's leading businesses, governments and institutions. So I just wonder whether it could be McKinsey that's been advising on the government policy to do with children.
Makes sense, wouldn't it?
BBC, of course, is in a little bit of a pickle at the moment because it's produced a report saying there was a little bit of confusion over Savile. But apparently Jeremy Paxman has been grilling senior BBC people. So a little bit of turbulence inside the BBC, a little bit of a puppet show. Quite clearly they have no idea what was really going on, but they're prepared to continue to protect paedophiles, as we've seen by Radio 4 refusing to get involved with Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. Where does their advice come from? Well, of course, we'll just come back to this gentleman, Marcus Agius, who was being paid a mere £47,000 for 28 days' work per year for the BBC Trust. I believe, as chairman of Barclays Bank, it was Barclays that was involved in the rate rigging. Libor, that's the word, yeah. So and you picked up on, my goodness, common purpose.
Yeah, I found it before you did. Eric Pickles has slammed town hall bosses and council bosses wasting too much money on leadership training with common purpose courses, Brian.
It's incredible, isn't it?
Local government secretary called on councils to spend less on the organisation described as the left's answer to the Old Boys Network, which provides leadership advice. He said it was wrong that the town hall spends thousands of pounds sending staff and councillors on such courses at a time when frontline service were under threat. Community Secretary Eric Pickles has launched a booklet for councils called 50 Ways to Save, and we've got that.
I'll just bring up a picture,
Have a little picture of the little beauty.
Well, here he is. Here's Mr. Pickles, and clearly Mr. Pickles is not cutting back on shirt sizes. So this, and the hypocrisy in this story is, of course, David Cameron has been an active supporter of common purpose, and so has Francis Maude for many, many years. So has Bob Kerslake, head of the civil service. So the Tory party have absolutely been part of the cross-party common purpose agenda, and now here they are trying to actually suggest that, of course, they are the ones promoting the cutback.
Do you think they're going to maybe collapse it?
Well, we've had some interesting comments coming through from some people who are definitely not happy inside the civil service, and it's been suggested to the UK column that common purpose is going to be sacrificed and collapsed, and this is to try and fool the general public into believing that's the end of common purpose. Meanwhile, the common purpose techniques, the reframing, the recruiting of networks will actually carry on through all of the organisations that train local government authorities. And of course the man who is now in the position to head this very devious political behavioural reframing is Sir Bob Kerslake, ex-chief executive of Sheffield, now head of the civil service. So I believe that this whole article is a smokescreen. They're going to collapse common purpose. They hope that attention will then go away, but I can assure them that we are not going away. We are going to continue to watch this lady, Julia Middleton, who was part of the article. We'll just call her up here. If technology works.
She's the founder, isn't she? Founder.
Well, yeah, she claims to be, but actually when you really dig into it, of course, she picked up a lot of the ideas from America, and I think this is where the Saul Alinsky policy came in. So this is quite a story, and we're going to stay on track with it. David Cameron, complete hypocrite, as is this man, with Francis Maud, of course, because they have been promoting common purpose.
And this is the document that we're just about to show that you can go and download for yourselves, gov.uk, written by Pickles, 50 ways to save, and it's gone around to all local councils on the best ways to spend money. So, yeah, that's freely available for everyone to have a look at.
Right, I haven't seen the document myself, but I will be studying it. But I'm going to say my prediction is that when you look at how the council's going to save money, the result of such action will be to help lock them further into the big society agenda, which is a police state. Waking Times.
Waking Times, they're really putting out some excellent articles at the moment. We know about the amount of fracking that we're looking at doing over here at the moment, and ways to save energy. Well, over in America, medical and scientific experts and scientists and engineers for healthy energy have said that this is not safe, this hacking, and that we should be considering the health effects of natural gas fracking before allowing any permits. They want the American government to consider 2 ethical principles adhered to by doctors: do not harm and that of informed consent. Their main concern is with flowback water produced during the fracking process that comes back up to the surface. Companies still won't reveal what's in the chemical fluid mixed with water used to extract the gas, citing a potential loss of competitive advantage. Well, I know there's a lot of protest groups now starting up about fracking all across the country, because I believe they might be starting it in Blackpool. I could be wrong on that, but I know they're looking at starting at other places. And I've seen a film called Gasland. Some people saying it's not genuine, but
it gets you thinking.
It gets you thinking on the subject, and it's the chemicals that they're pumping down into the ground and the way they're extracting the gas, which is causing many, many, many health problems.
Yeah.
So there is a film called Gasland, and Waking Times. This article's up there, and it's very, very interesting. They're putting out a lot of good stuff, actually.
Okay, Mike, it's over to you with a very smart phone here, very desirable. I've caught you on the hop there.
Oh, this blooming thing is work. Right. Basically, yesterday we talked about Instagram, and we were discussing the issue that people that they changed their terms and conditions, and people thought that this meant that they were going to be selling people's photographs to third parties. Instagram has now come out with a statement on this, basically saying ownership rights. They're saying that Instagram owners own their own content, and Instagram does not claim any ownership rights over your photos. And so it goes on, and they end that little paragraph with the word period, so that they're absolutely determined that you own your photos and that they will not be selling your photos to any third party.
Not yet, anyway.
No, they're saying period. That's it.
Right, okay.
Right. Now, hold on. It goes on to say, under privacy settings, it goes on to say, nothing has changed about the control you have over over who can see your photos. If you set your photos to private, Instagram will only share your photos with people you've approved to follow you. We hope this simple control makes it easy for everyone to decide what level of privacy makes sense. So again, that all sounds very reasonable. This is a quote from a statement by the chief executive, by the way, as a direct result of the sort of furore over the change in terms and conditions. But the key point here is, you know, if they're not selling, if that was a misunderstanding and they're not selling your intellectual property, what is it that they're selling? Well, because of course they're still selling something. So what they're actually selling is your use of their website. So they're profiling what you're doing. They're profiling who you're making connections with, who's making connections with you, and they're profiling your activity on the website. They're selling that information. And you know, so you could perhaps look at this as a typical initial overreaction, and then of course they say, well, it's not as bad as everybody thinks, and everybody can relax now. But
the minimum we can say is that people's supposedly private information, the more you are using these type of phones and devices, the less protection you have over your privacy.
The more you use these type of websites, the more information you're giving them about the way that you do things, the type of things that you're doing, who you're doing it with, and that information is being built, particularly because this company is owned by Facebook. That information is then being connected up with other information that Facebook holds in its database, and of course, you know, Google is tracking everything that you're doing. You know, a lot of people are using alternative search engines other than Google because they think that that's going to prevent you being tracked. But in fact, you know, cookies are being set for a range of different things by a range of different companies, and they're swapping the information. So your activity on the internet is being tracked. This is another example of it. That information is being sold to corporations, insurance companies, and other organisations. Okay. And you are the product.
Right, got to move on because we've got some guests on.
We can do this Monday, that article. Because
well, should we just give a taste?
Just a very quick taste,
Which Monday are we talking about?
Oh, no, we're away, aren't we? Yeah. No, yeah, we'll do it quickly now then. On the Daily Bell, I found vaccines are really close to my heart and the damages it can do to people, to children. And leaked confidential documents exposes 36 infants have died after receiving the Infanrix Hexa injection. A GlaxoSmithKline document recently leaked to the press exposed that with a 2-year period, a total of 36 children have died after receiving the 6-in-1 vaccine. So I went on to TruthVax to find out what Infanrix has in it, and it has aluminium hydroxide, bovine extract, formaldehyde, glutaraldehyde, and some other names that I can't pronounce and I'm not going to attempt to.
But so they don't sound very good.
They don't sound very good. And Natural News then has a little bit of a breakdown, and especially in the bovine extract, extracted from cow skin when injected cause connective tissue disorders, arthritis and lupus, also shortness of breath, low blood pressure, chest pain and skin reactions. So then the aluminium will cause, I've got it all here, autism. Aluminium greatly increases toxicity of mercury, so caution about minimum mercury tolerance is therefore severely underestimated. CDC scientists and all doctors are well aware of this. And the thimerosal, a neurotoxic mercury which causes autisms. There are 5 micrograms in one average flu vaccine, and the EPA safety limit is 5 micrograms. So children who are vaccinated simultaneously with multiple vaccines receives over 10 times the safety limit of mercury in one day. Right. So loads and loads to talk about on that, right. And that links into that. That's, yeah, you can find it on Natural News. There's all a bit more information.
As always, we're going to say to people, we're putting information across to you. Please go away and research it yourself and check it and double check it. This is a very serious issue. It's to do with people's health. It's quite clear to us from the material we're getting in that the government and the so-called health agencies are not telling us the truth over vaccines. There's a site here which Louise picked up on Vax Truth that's actually got a table. You can scroll up and down that and see exactly what is in some of the products that the pharmaceutical companies are pushing forward.
And then if you're lucky, go over to Natural News and find out what each one of those ingredients can do to the body. Can we just plug tomorrow's show?
Please do.
Tomorrow on the Liberty Tactics show, Ian Crane's joining us, if we're all still here, that is.
Yeah, we will
and Ian Crane's going to be on from 6 p.m. on tns.ning.com. So James and I will be doing our last show of the year.
Brilliant.
So it'd be great to have people there.
Okay.
I want to wish everyone happy Christmas, because that's it now for me to the new year.
Okay.
Happy Christmas, everyone, and thank you for the support everyone's giving to the UK column. We really appreciate it.
That's good. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Well, we have some guests coming on the show now. Louise is going to be leaving us, but we're going to be joined by Mick Harby and Mr. Coles, who has got well, they're both between them, but it's Mr. Coles has got a phenomenal story to tell about the treatment of his wife inside a care home. So we'll just check communications. And usually you're going to go live on camera. You're going to disappear, Louise.
Oh, well, I think they'll probably get Mick and Mr. Coles up. So
okay, that's good.
Loop out then.
Okay. So are you there, Mick?
Yes, I'm here, Brian.
Okay. Well, just set the scene. Mick Harby, of course, is the ex-Royal Marine who's been with us on the show twice, I think, to talk about what's happened to him in his life since he's left the service. And Mick has been fighting in the courts, not only his own cases, but to reveal essentially the corruption which is now going on within our courts. So that's another story. But with him in the shop is Mr. Coles, and it's Mr. Coles that's really got this incredible story to tell about what's happened to his wife. So, Mick, I'm going to pass it over to you. Give us an introduction, or between you, give us an introduction and tell us what this whole thing is about.
Okay, initially what it was, I was going to Exeter Court in relation to my own cases, just to put some paperwork into the court. And outside the court, I seen Mr. John Coles here. And he was sat in his car with leaflets on his car asking for some help. So I went, briefly spoke to John. He seemed quite upset. So I went into the court. I filed my paperwork, which literally took me about 5-10 minutes. And I came back to his car, and he started to tell me his inability to have access to his wife, who is in a care home. John has been quite well known within Exeter, at the bus station, in the town centre, outside the courts, trying to advertise and bring awareness to people of how he's been treated within the judicial system. So if John, if you'd like to first of all basically trying to explain the story to Brian of what's happened to you.
Mr. Coles, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm just going to explain to our listeners very politely that, of course, you have a little bit of a limitation on your hearing, and
yes.
And so if we need to clarify some of the things that you're saying, we'll come up and just repeat some of the things, just so that everything comes across as easily as possible. But thank you very much for coming on UK Column Live. We know it takes a bit of courage to actually come and do something live, and so we're very keen to hear what's been happening to you and your wife. So tell us a bit about that.
Well, my wife was went into hospital. She came out of hospital, went to another small hospital. The social service come along, said she had to go into a nursing home. I said no, because the nurse was coming night and morning to see my wife, and I was looking after her during the day. Social services said she's got to go in a nursing home, and they put her in a nursing home. Well, while she was in there, things happened. I said, I used to do a lot of voluntary work. Is there any voluntary work I can do? Yes, we got a big garden at the back. Would you like to clean it up? Yeah. So the wife used to sit in a wheelchair on sunny days and watch me clean the garden. I was cleaning the garden, taking the stuff down the council yard to get rid of it. And one day the rubbish was full of ants. I put it in the car, the boot of the car. The next thing, the car was full of ants. I wouldn't do any more. Then they started to get nasty with me, and I took my wife back on a Christmas Eve. We went to my daughter's for Christmas Day, dinner and tea. After tea, I took her back to the nursing home, put her in the nursing home, and I wasn't feeling too well. I went home and I told her I'd be back in a few minutes. Well, I was back within 15 minutes to my wife. When I got in the nursing home, I couldn't find her anywhere. They said she'd gone into somebody else's room. We went into every room to see if we could find her. We couldn't find her. I walked down the passage, sir, whether I heard the thing or I didn't.
Just calm down, calm down.
Whether I did hear her. I opened the airing cupboard door, tried to open the airing cupboard door. I couldn't do it. She'd gone in the airing cupboard and fell down. A little nurse had to get through the side to get her up and get her out again. That was one instant. One morning
can I just stop you there? What John's basically saying, Brian, is because obviously he's getting quite upset. We need to keep this quite calm and get the points across. Is you start to make complaints? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
So what John's saying is he's seen that he wasn't happy with the care of of your wife? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I was happy with the care, but more could have been done.
Okay, right.
Right, so if I just bring you back to something you said at the beginning, which I found very interesting. Your wife was in a big hospital and then went into a smaller one.
Yes, sir.
And then you said they said she had to go into a nursing home. Were you actually consulted in that decision?
Pardon?
Did they consult you? Did they ask for your opinion when they said
Oh, yes.
Right.
Yes, I went with my son-in-law to see a nursing home. I didn't like what I saw.
Right.
And I went to this other nursing home. I wasn't all that keen, but they said, oh, it's near your house and it's quite close to you.
Right.
So we put her in there. So they put her in the nursing home.
Right, so your wife goes into the nursing home, and then there are several incidents when you become concerned at the way that she's being treated.
That is correct, sir.
Right,
that is correct.
and you make a complaint, or you make several complaints.
Yeah, I made a complaint.
Right.
Get him out of here, he's seen too much.
Right, okay, so you make a complaint, and then what does the nursing home do or say to you?
Well, I'd seen too much and get him out. They got social services to get me out.
And
social service done the damage.
And how did what do you mean when you say social services got you out?
Well, they went to court and things like that. They came to my house. They came into my house, social service did, without being asked. Two of them, a man and a lady, came to my house, knocked on the door. I was upstairs with my sister doing my bedroom. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to see them. In the end, I went down and they came around the back of the house, came in the house and sat in my house.
Right. And so what did they say to you?
Pardon?
What did they say to you?
Well, I can't remember all of it, sir, but they really went telling me, you won't see your wife. You won't see your wife.
Just so I've got that right, you were saying that they told you you wouldn't see your wife.
That's right, sir, they did.
And did they give you a reason?
No.
And how long ago was this?
About 3 years ago, sir.
And so is it 3 years since you last saw your wife?
That is correct, sir. That is correct.
And they have prevented you from going into the nursing home to see her?
Yes, that is correct, sir. That is correct.
Right. And it's gone through the courts?
Yes, sir.
And what are the courts saying to you?
I can't see my wife till next March.
And what reason are they giving you for that?
Pardon?
What reason are the courts?
No reason. I've had no really a reason why they done it.
Right. And what sort of court was it? Was it a court with a jury, or were you just in front of a judge?
A judge and a lady. The lady was there. She never said a word. I don't know who she was. She was sat with the judge. There was 4 staff in court, and one of the staff got up in the court, went in the witness box, and had the Bible in her hand and the card, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and she was telling lies, sir. She was telling lies. And I said, she's lying. Quiet, please. I said, it took me out. And she was definitely lying, sir.
Right, and then the decision of that court was that you were, presumably, you were not to go to the nursing home and attempt to see your wife. That's
correct, sir.
Right.
I couldn't even give her flowers. I had to give my friend flowers to take them to the nursing home to give the staff to give to my wife. I was not allowed to go down myself.
Right. We've taken a decision today not to talk the detail of the name of the nursing home, but I'm going to ask you: would you tell us where the court was that you went to, where this happened?
Exeter, Magistrates Court in Exeter.
No, family court, isn't it?
Pardon?
The family court.
The county court, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it means was it the family court?
No,
where I met you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's outside Exeter Combined Court, Brian. And from the details that John's passed to me, it seems that's in a closed-door family court, as we're quite familiar with. With no press officer there, no public, just closed-door courts, you know.
Was it? Do we think it was a magistrate, or was it actually a judge?
Was it a judge?
Judge. I'm not sure it was.
Right. So, of course, Mick, you'll be picking up on this very quickly, that this decision was made behind closed doors by, we think it's a judge, with a single person giving testimony for the other side. And was Mr. Coles on his own? Did he have any form of legal representation with him?
No, he was outside the court on his own. He's been running a petition for people, the members of the public, to sign his petition. He was outside the court. I know you've had legal representation for a few years. Is that correct?
Yes.
But nothing concrete was established, or I'll rephrase that. Nothing positive for John has been accepted or progressed. So it's as if, from the conversations I've had with John, as if he's been blocked, and as the experience I've seen with some of these courts, his evidence has been used and has been ignored, and you said false evidence has been put against you, obviously away from the public, which we can't see. So it seems like another regenerated story that we've become quite familiar with. So I was just basically walking to the court. I seen John sat in his car. He seemed upset. I sat down and talked to him for a little bit. We went and had lunch together, didn't we? And had a coffee and that. And I then started to get a few details. And obviously, this was nearly two weeks ago. Right. So,
but this is a very, very. I'm using the word development, because we've followed all of the family court cases where of course children are being taken away from their parents, and I personally had the experience of sitting in some of those courts with parents. Mm-hmm. I have seen social services people get up, as Mr. Coles said, they take the oath, they then proceeded to lie to the court. I've seen documents claiming a pack of lies, essentially perjury. I've then seen the judge say, oh, well, this is a simple mistake by social services, so if I had done it, or the other side, the parents had done it, it would be perjury. But when children's services do it, it's dismissed as a simple mistake. So I have personally been there and experienced the system of being in a closed court, and then public officials lie and skew the truth in order to achieve their objective. But this case, sorry, just to push the point home, this case, we are seeing a husband and wife separated within a closed court. So no jury, no press, a single magistrate, and on solely the word of presumably somebody from social services, this
nursing home, sir.
Pardon?
The nursing home.
It was only on the word of the nursing home.
Yes.
Right.
Because essentially what struck me with this particular case, Brian, was the fact that, as John's explained, he started to make complaints from the conversations we've had, and this is where the blockages come down. You know, and that seems to be common practice, you know. So he's made his complaints, and then it's been turned on to you, John, where they inventing, from what it seems, inventing a problem and holding John responsible for that, for that problem, basically passing the buck of blame onto John because he's had concerns about the treatment of his wife. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Right. And can I ask how, I understand that it's only friends or other relatives who are getting in to see your wife at the moment. Do you know how your wife is at the moment? Is she in reasonably good health?
No, I don't think so. I ring every night and every morning, and they tell me she's had a quiet night or a quiet day.
So you don't even actually get to speak to your wife on the telephone?
No, I never spoke to my wife on the telephone.
Right. And is
your quiet night, quiet day, and then sometimes they do hold the phone. A lot of times they put the phone down on me.
Right. Okay. And when you've been into court, I think this is an important question, because one of the things we watch is essentially how much money solicitors and barristers are making from these terrible cases. But when you've had a solicitor presumably helping you, were you paying for that solicitor yourself?
No, I never paid anything. The legal aid.
Right. So essentially, the longer your case goes on, the more money that law firm can actually take out of the public purse.
Can you tell Brian about the letter from Birmingham in the taxi?
Oh yes, a lady come to Birmingham with a letter for me to sign. She was supposed to read it to me, sign it, and take it back to Birmingham. She came then, I signed the letter. She never read it. She jumped in the taxi and went again.
So basically, the legal aid, or the money that was paid out, was to bring a letter all the way down from Birmingham in a taxi to get John to sign, to go all the way back to Birmingham just to sign that document. So the point we have here is the money to be spent on that resource just to get a taxi from Birmingham to sign a document to go back. It makes no sense, does it? So these are sort of payments that are getting paid out to these people, or the expenses that are getting used.
Yeah. And Mr. Coles, if I can ask you, have you spoken to your local MP?
Yes, I've spoken to Bradshaw quite a few times.
And can you just tell me who is your local MP?
It's Ben Bradshaw, Labour.
Oh, it's Mr. Bradshaw. And what's Mr. Bradshaw done for you?
Nothing. I think he wrote a few letters for me, but he did nothing.
The first day I met John, after we had lunch together, I suggested to John that we go down to the MP and pay a visit. And I went in and spoke to the secretary, and they confirmed pretty much everything John had said to me about he hadn't seen his wife for 3 years. Again, trying to put the brunt of the blame onto John. I come out with suggestions that I'm happy to obviously find out more about the situation, but I'm here as a member of the public to help John, and I'd be happily assist to go in with John so he could see his wife. I'm happy to do that to ensure there is no controversy getting displayed, because all you want to see is your wife by Christmas, isn't it?
Yeah. There's one thing, sir. The doctor said he'd go with me to see my wife. I'll ask him at the nursing home if you can. And they said no.
Right. So we've got a nursing home, and can I ask, you may not know, but I'm sure you will, is it a private nursing home? Or
yes, it's private.
So this is a private company which is actually being able to dictate whether you can see your wife or not. Private nursing home which is being supported by the local council, effectively, to stop you seeing your wife.
Yes, the local council pays for my wife.
Right. Well, I've got to say, Mr. Coles, that I've been doing this now for several years. I've heard some absolutely horrific stories to do with families and what's happened to their children. But your story, which I've heard for the first time live here this afternoon, I find absolutely disgusting. I could use some other words for it. But some of it does not surprise me, because we are clearly seeing local councils and private companies starting to take more and more things into their own hands. In short, they're making the law up. But Mick, you've quite rightly picked up on this case. I think that people that are watching UK Column Live and listening to our broadcasts, I think there's going to be a huge number of people out there and other members of the public who would like to get involved and help Mr. Coles.
Well, and this is the element we've got to look at. This isn't a public interest. This is our older generation who has done service. Now, John served in the army with the Gloucestershire Regiment, and the Glorious Gloucesters, I think, is the nickname of that particular regiment. So he's worked all his life. He's served this country, and this is pretty much how we treat our older generation. And I'm not going to walk by and see an old man like John in this situation, because he was distraught when I first met him. There have been a few times since we've spoken, and people can't turn a blind eye to this. This is in the public interest, and in my opinion, how I look at it from my own experience, and especially from looking at John's experience, is if the judicial system is failing, then who do we go to? Where is our remedy? It's with the MPs. And as John's clarified, Ben Bradshaw has done very little, next to nothing. And what struck me as quite interesting was I was reading the Western Morning News this week, and Ben Bradshaw's in there promoting himself as a good Christian. Well, if anyone is in opinion of myself, this is at Christmas time. John just wants to deliver a bunch of flowers to his wife, thank her for the long marriage they've had together. And at this time of year, I would say this is when I would have thought Ben Bradshaw or any other MP or anyone else in that political arena could step forward and do something for John, because the people are doing something. You know, where's our remedy? Where's John's remedy here?
Okay. Right, Mick, what I'm going to say, thinking on my feet, I'm also watching the clock a little bit, because we're going to, in about 3 minutes, we're going to have to move on with the rest of the topics we've got. This is what I'd like to say. I am absolutely appalled by this case. It's clear that the remedy has got to be in the hands of the general public. The general public have got to solve this problem. So we will do our part by obviously getting this broadcast out. I'd like to call this afternoon live on air for any members of the public that are watching this broadcast, and if you feel as aggrieved as we do about what's happened to Mr. Coles, I think that we should be calling Mr. Ben Bradshaw, calling his office. I will make a call after this programme. Okay. Let's start putting some pressure on the MPs and getting them to do their job. The other thing I'm going to suggest is this, since John is an old soldier, let's get some of these charities that say they are there to support the military, let's get them on the case or see why they won't support. And also, if you're in agreement, and I'm sure you are, you're going to stick with John, then we will work with you to get this case fully into the public domain, because I believe it's going to be solved by sheer weight of public opinion.
Well, that's the only way you can move forward now, isn't it? Because I don't know if you feel this way, I'm sure fairly similar, is that I feel we're getting let down constantly. I will add though, we have had an MP who has generated some interest in this story, but I can't really give any details or developments on that because it's only materialised in the past 2 days. So there is interest there.
One of the things I would say is, of course, we have to watch very carefully. The politicians love hiding behind a little protocol which says that MPs can only MPs can't get involved directly get involved in the cases within within other constituencies. We've seen this being done to the families, but if there is an MP that's starting to pay attention, then obviously that MP deserves support and encouragement.
Well, I know from Twitter, I'm not too familiar with Twitter and Facebook, but there has been also generating quite a bit of support, like what happened to me when I got sent to prison for merely giving presents and Easter eggs to my children. Is the public, the general public, will make that difference. And I'd like to thank two individuals, Samantha and Tamara, who have helped me develop and try and move on John's story and get the public interested in the alternative media like we're doing now, as John has been doing everything he can around Exeter and bringing awareness that way. Okay. So it's combining these two together. I think it seems to be working and cause an effect.
Okay, right. Mr. Coles, I'm going to say to you, thank you very much for coming on UK Column Live and telling.
I fell in there and broke her hip and was taken to the RD&E. She did fall. Right. And then,
okay. Right, Mr. Coles, we're going to have to move on.
Yes,
I will work with Mick to do whatever we can to help you
Thank you.
Be reunited with your wife.
54 years of a wonderful marriage.
Okay. All right. Thank you both very much for coming with us. We are going to stay with your case. We'll do everything we can, and I'll liaise with Mick to see how we do that. But I will make a call for you straight after this show.
That's absolutely brilliant, Brian. Thank you very much.
Okay, and we will do another programme for you.
Thank you, Brian. You're very, very kind.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, there we are. Isn't it absolutely, I was going to say astounding, but I think the correct word is horrific, what is actually happening in Britain in 2012. We have our politicians fomenting wars overseas, and we have this horrific behaviour by the so-called public services going on behind our backs. If we're going to deal with it, we need the public to wake up and realise that the real criminals are in Westminster. Now we're going to move on with an interview with Robert Green, which is to do with the Holly Gregg case, the rape and abuse of a Down syndrome girl covered up by the Scottish establishment. And we're going to be looking at that event in light of what's been happening around the BBC, Jimmy Savile, and gagging of the media. So it's about 50 minutes long, and then I'll just do a quick close to the programme. So stay with us for a very interesting interview with Robert Green on the subject of Holly Gregg. But welcome back into the studio.
Thank you very much indeed, Brian.
Okay, and we're going to have a talk this afternoon about the Holly Gregg case, but we're going to be putting it in context of what's going on in the wider field at the moment, of which the key thing is, of course, Jimmy Savile.
Yes.
And we know the BBC's just recently made a statement following their internal investigation, which we'll come on to.
Yes.
But I'm just going to call up this first slide, which for me sort of puts things in perspective. We've obviously got the man at the centre of the allegations, which is Savile. The other people there we're not commenting on. We're just focusing on Savile. And I've asked some questions here. Supposing that the real paedophiles are actually in positions of power, they're in the judiciary, in the government, the police, the public sector, supposing that they are linked, and supposing that they want to control the media. We've got people who are so powerful, they're doing some extremely dirty things, and basically they then want to control the media. Where would that actually put us? And I believe it puts us in quite a dangerous position, really.
I think so, and I think we're already in that dangerous position.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. So, of course, one of the largest sources of media in this country is the BBC. And again, this is a slide I've used before, but I think it's quite a telling one. This was a initiative that was run by the BBC some years ago, which was called, a few years ago, which was called Children, Families Wanted. And they were advertising and really effectively sponsoring to gain foster parents for children. Sorry, I was stuttering a bit over that one. And they produced a magazine, which we got hold of a copy of, and on the right of the screen we can see some of the open pictures where literally they were advertising children, I said, like puppies. And when we actually questioned the BBC as to whether these children had been given up by free will by their parents, they went very squeamish on me. They eventually put me in touch with a consultant they were using, a lady. Right. She didn't want to answer the questions, or couldn't, and all of a sudden I couldn't get hold of her anymore. But the key thing was, here was the BBC getting right in the middle of this very delicate area of children being taken away from their families. We now know that children are being taken and abused in the so-called care system, and here was the BBC helping, and clearly they hadn't done any homework over whether these children had been taken by the state, stolen, or whether actually the parents had given them up freely. So I'm just putting those two things up as a bit of context for people on the BBC. But we've learnt today that the BBC has come up with a result. Now, this is the internal report that they've done.
Yes.
And, well, we can read it off the screen. It says, there was chaos and confusion at the BBC over a shelved report into sexual abuse by Jimmy Savile, but there had been no cover-up.
Oh, right.
So the BBC has investigated itself to its entire satisfaction.
Yes.
And surprise, surprise, it's actually come up with that there was no cover-up.
Yes.
What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I would think if the BBC are investigating themselves, then what else can we expect? It really defies any belief, actually. There's no rational reason to accept that finding whatsoever. It flies in the face of everything we know and everything we've heard. Yeah. That's my view.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to see whether we can actually show a little bit of the attitude of the BBC when it comes to safeguarding youngsters and children. This is part of a UK column article that we did in May 2009, and of course it brings us to the heart of the matter, because this was a report over the fact that BBC Scotland abruptly dropped their investigations into Holly Gregg case. Now, we did, the last time you and I met and spoke about the Holly Gregg case, you did cover a little bit of it, but just give us a recap as to what the BBC did at the time.
Yes, I will. In April 2009, after the Holly Gregg case first came into the mainstream media via the News of the World, I was approached by Mark Daly of the BBC, who was very keen to actually do a programme on Holly Gregg's case. He explained to me that the BBC were well aware of sexual abuse of children in Scotland, particularly ones with disabilities like Holly, and they were very keen to do a programme to expose what was really going on in the country. He asked if they would do a programme for us. I thought that was for Anne, Holly and myself, but they wanted an exclusive. They wanted to drop all the other people who wanted to do the story, and of course, as a result of the News of the World story, which was fairly sensational, I was approached by many different organisations. But we had a chat, Anne and I, and we decided that the BBC would probably be the best bet to get it out in the widest possible context.
As an organisation with reputations, an organisation that you would be led to believe you should trust.
Led believe, and Mark Daly assured me that was the case. He actually said, we are the best people to do this, I can assure you, Robert. So we decided we would go along with that. We provided much of the expert witness document, certainly the documents that I used to as a basis for the campaign to get the police to question those named by Holly. And on the basis of that, several weeks went by. I think in the last programme we showed the letters, the correspondence I had with Mark Daly, confirming that they'd commissioned 2 programmes, BBC Radio Scotland, BBC TV Scotland, and the likely prospect of going nationwide with Panorama. Several weeks went by, they were happy about everything. 4th of June 2009, Mark Daly, Cathy Long and Liam McDougall of Panorama came down to Holly and Anne's home in Scotland, Shropshire, from Scotland to Shropshire. And we had a 5.5-hour discussion there in which Holly went over all the basic points of this. The team were very shocked to what they'd heard. I think it was even worse than they thought.
Did you know whether they were an experienced team? You started out by saying the BBC had said they were well aware of the abuse going on in Scotland, and they were keen to actually produce a programme. So
absolutely. Mark Daly particularly specified, I think we've had this in writing, that he was very keen to interview these people who Holly had named, obviously on the basis that police had failed to do so.
Right, so this wasn't a question of the BBC dabbling a toe in this particular case. The team were saying to you that up front they knew that abuse was going on.
Yes.
And because of that they wanted to grab the chance of exposing it.
They were interested in other cases in Scotland, so I was told, but they'd actually seen this article obviously in the News of the World and thought this looked very convincing, and as a result they put a lot of time and effort into investigating and looked at all the documentation, which they agreed was overwhelmingly supported Holly's allegations. After our meeting on the 4th of June, it went very amicably. The 3 journalists then left, saying that they would actually be sending a film crew along, and that a film would come out, a documentary would come out later in the summer or early autumn. So we were very happy about that, and remained so until the 10th of June, when Mark Daly spoke to both Anne Gregg and myself separately to say that suddenly the project was off. They'd been told to drop everything. And the upshot of why...
Sorry, did they actually say who had told them to drop it?
No, what happened was that they were told if they carried on, they would be dismissed.
Wow, so this is not, we don't think, what's the sort of language the BBC might use? We don't think that the BBC can run with this story due to, sort of implications, but it was that strong, that if they attempted to run with the story, they'd be dismissed.
So he said very much the same thing to Anne as well, and I asked him who had threatened him, and he refused to answer. Subsequent to that, we had that was more or less the end of this, but obviously not the end for myself, because having not got anywhere with Mark Daly over this very serious situation after obviously they were really wanting to do the programme, I then wrote to Mark Thompson, who was then the Director General, to ask precisely which person had threatened the journalists over this case.
Right.
Mr. Thompson wrote back suggesting I contact the Complaints Department. I said, no, I don't want to speak to the Complaints Department. I want to speak to you. This is very, very serious indeed, and I'm not having you passing it off. He declined to answer, and so I wrote to the head of the BBC Trust at the time, Sir Michael Lyons, and got almost an identical type of answers from him as well. You need to talk to the Complaints Department. Again, said, no, I'm not interested to talk to the Complaints Department. This is so grave that I want an answer from you. And of course, again, he declined to
Right, and it's quite interesting that you wrote to Sir Michael Lyons.
Yes.
And you got a letter back which was referring you to complaints.
That's correct,
right.
Yes.
So we're going to have a look in a minute at some letters from Mr. Patton.
Yes.
Where he's also referring us to complaints. And in fact, we're not even sure whether Mr. Patton saw the original letters written to him. So is it the case, perhaps, that that was true with Sir Michael Lyons? He didn't see the letter.
We cannot know this. We've no way of knowing this. It may well be that he didn't see the letter. And I think we're seeing now, and we will talk about in a moment, with the current situation with Lord Patton, we have reason to believe that letters that should be seen by Lord Patton are being intercepted at this very moment.
Yeah, which is intriguing to say the least, but is it part of a cover-up?
Yes.
Well, one of the things that came into the news a little while ago was, well, there's been a number of reports across the press, but we decided we'd go with a couple of Mirror reports. And this one was giving a little insight into attitude in the BBC, because the headline was "Complain about Jimmy Savile's groping and we'll take back the Jim will fix it badge. Shock new claims against the BBC." And for me, this was a very interesting story where this little boy had been awarded a Jim will fix it badge, and then when the presentation was done, I think it was his mother was got a bit of Audrey Dean was allegedly assaulted by the paedophile while posing backstage for a photo with her son Mark. And when her husband actually tried to do something about this, he got a very flippant brush off that if you cause too much trouble, we'll have the medal back.
Yes.
So it's flippant, isn't it? It is a brush off. It's not going for the seriousness of the thing, but of course there's the little vicious twist in it, and we'll take. We'll take the medal away from your son. Or
That's
the badge,
right. Attack the complainant.
Yeah, yes. Attack the complainant.
Yes.
Yeah, which is something else I think we're going to flag up in a minute. And the other one here, well, this is 19th of November 2012. So, Jimmy Savile child abuse probe. The BBC Director General sets up whistleblower hotline for potential victims and witnesses. This to me was. This was all sort of bolting the door after the horse had gone, really.
Indeed.
And it's got a certain cynicism in it, as we'll see, because we still haven't seen any change in the BBC's attitude.
No.
So we come on really to Mr. Patton. We've got a nice picture of him here, looking suitably plump and well fed, as head of the BBC trustees should be, I suppose.
Yes.
And we've also flagged up, of course, that this man is a common purpose supporter, and we think it's appropriate to do this because, of course, the moment we're talking the press at the moment, we at some stage we have to mention Leveson.
Yes.
And as the mainstream press have exposed with the Daily Mail, the Telegraph, the Times and the Sun, that the whole of the Leveson inquiry has been has been infiltrated by common person.
Infiltrated, some might say orchestrated.
Indeed.
Yes.
Orchestrated and infiltrated, but hand in glove. So we just want to point out here that if we're dealing with Chris Patten as head of the BBC, we're automatically dealing with his links to common purpose as well.
Very much so.
But which way round have we got these? Well, this is a letter that you wrote to Mr. Patten. It was dated the 4th of December. I could probably just about read it out for here for listeners to the programme. Sorry, this is the reply back from Mr. Patten following your letter. Dear Mr. Green, thank you for your letter to Lord Patten, Chairman of the BBC Trust. I'm responding on his behalf as a member of the Trust Unit which supports and advises the Chairman and his trustees. I note your concerns about the BBC reporting of the Holly Gregg case. I should explain that the BBC's charter makes clear that editorial decisions and dealing with complaints about them rest with the BBC Executive and Director General in the first instance. There's a complaints process in place for instances. I've therefore passed your letter to the BBC Audience Services so that they can respond to you on behalf of the BBC's management. So you write to them on...
Yes, if I may interject, Brian, here.
Of course.
I wrote that letter on the advice of the Culture Secretary, Maria Miller's office. I wrote to her first and she suggested writing to the Trust.
Right, which you did.
Which I did, and only to be fobbed off to some other department.
Yeah, and absolutely, and the department that you're actually passed on to, with the so-called BBC Complaints Department, is not even their department. It's outsourced to another company, which I believe is Capita.
Well, that seems to be the case. I did phone up Mr. Hamer, who was the signatory on the letter, and I asked him if Lord Patten had actually seen my letter, and he didn't know. But he's promised to look into it and will let me know sometime this week.
Well, it's very interesting this. Now, our viewers and our listeners are not going to believe this, but this is absolutely true, that the UK column also wrote to Mr. Patten, and this is total coincidence, but we happen to do it on the same day. Whether people believe that or not, it's up to them. But basically, I simply said, against the backdrop of the Jimmy Savile case and the fact that these abuses have gone on inside the BBC, could Mr. Patten confirm that there was now a BBC policy for editors not to investigate child abuse cases? Yes. And I got the reply back here. Dear Mr. Gerrish, thank you for your letter to Lord Patten, Chairman of the BBC Trust. I'm responding on his behalf as a member of the Trust Unit, which supports and advises the Chairman. I should explain that the role of the Trust is distinct to that of the BBC's management. I've therefore passed your letter to the BBC Audience Services so that they can provide you with a response. Oh, yes. Now, I was curious about this because Mr. Hamer from the BBC Trust Unit didn't actually say who he was. So I phoned the number and I was told that he was a member of the, essentially the correspondence team. I pointed out to him that his reply was very flippant because I was talking about child safety and he'd simply fobbed me off with passing the letter through to complaints. And in the discussion, it became obvious to me that Lord Patten had not seen my original letter in the first place. And indeed, that was later confirmed by an email from Mr. Hamer. Yes. So we've got here the position that when you write in to the head of the BBC Trust on the matter of child abuse, child safety, child protection, somebody appears to be blocking the letters before they get to him. Yes.
Now, is Lord Patten aware of this, or isn't he, I think?
Well, we don't know.
We should know.
We don't know, but I've been told that this letter is my original letter is now going to be passed on to him so that I can expect a reply from him in person. I've got a feeling I won't get a reply, but we'll see. Yes. But we wanted to show this little incident to viewers to show that when you're actually dealing with the BBC, the moment you correspond with them, you communicate with them, there's an inherent deviousness because you think you're receiving a reply from
the person you've written to,
Mr. Patten, after he's actually seen it. Somebody's written a reply for him, but the man at least knows what the content.
Exactly.
And what we've learnt is that this is a scam.
Yes.
And they're prepared to, they're prepared to use a scam even when the subject is child abuse.
Yes, and even when they've been caught red-handed over child abuse. As nothing could be more serious than this particular topic.
Absolutely. Well, one of the reasons that we UK column got curious about this was because a Radio 4 journalist, Sarah, and with that, her name went out of my head.
Stanbridge. Is it Nicholas Stanbridge?
Nicholas Stanbridge, yeah. I'll just get Nicholas Stanbridge. Was that basically she contacted us because she wanted information over the our reports of abuse at Oxford and Cherwell Valley College. I had a long telephone conversation with her in the first place, in which she asked some good questions. She'd obviously read the article. She was particularly interested in where we were quoting documents or quoting from emails, and she wanted to meet me in order to have a look at documentary evidence that we held and in order to talk about the case with a view to reporting it.
Yes.
So the agreement was that we were going to set up a date to meet, and about 10 days later when I phoned her up to say, right, we're going to meet, she backs away, and in fact we've played the recording before live, so we're not going to repeat that. But basically she is then backing away from me at speed. She says that basically she has spoken to the authorities and she has spoken to people around the case, and she's got more important things to do than meet me.
And I understand the people around the case are the people who've been accused of covering it up,
well,
not the victims.
You've been able to hear the telephone conversation, of course, and basically, she's saying that she's met the local authorities, she's presumably talked to the police, so she speaks to all the people who are actually covering up the terrible things that have gone on the college, and that's her answer. Now she doesn't want to talk to
So
to
she's
me.
actually admitted to accepting one side of this case without hearing the other. That's basically it, isn't it? So much for the impartiality of the BBC.
Indeed, but worse than that is that when I put a little bit of pressure on her, saying, well, you haven't spoken to the victims, what she then does is accuse me of preventing the victims from coming forward to speak to her.
Which is interesting, yes.
When the issue was that we said that she would be able to meet victims once trust had been built up, because people around these cases, as you know very well, get exceptionally nervous and frightened of what's going on.
But she'd already agreed to meet you.
Indeed.
So what changed?
Well, she said that basically her editor was the man who was making the decision, and I think it is this man.
Yes.
And what is interesting about this particular gentleman is that he is he's been involved, I believe, with this internal investigation which they've reported today. Now that might not be correct, so people listening to this aspect, I need to double check on that, but I think that he certainly had an input into the internal BBC investigation into Savile, child abuse, etc.
Well, I think perhaps Mr. Thomas would like to speak for himself on this one.
I think we could ask him about that.
Yes.
But the culture we're looking at from the BBC, even after the revelations as to what's happened with Jimmy Savile, are certainly not that they're showing an inherent concern for victims or to get the lid off child abuse in UK or Scotland.
No, I don't think so. I think some of the reports that I've seen from the BBC indicated that when Savile was first exposed, they made great play of this. This happened in the 70s and the 80s. It's not like that now at the BBC.
Yeah.
That is what I heard a number of times. Absolutely wrong. Nothing has changed at the BBC. In fact, there are reasons to believe it's got actually worse as far as the covering up of paedophilia is concerned within the corporation.
Well, I can say to you that in the last couple of weeks we've been contacted by people who are working with the BBC. They are very concerned aspects of the culture they are still witnessing. But the key point is that we've got this huge, effectively, propaganda machine for the government.
Yes.
And it seems to me that the BBC, for whatever reason, does not want to report the issue of child abuse and paedophilia.
Yes.
So, well, Lord Leveson's in the background. We better put him up in his fine outfit here. and this was a label that we'd previously used, the press and media to be ruled by the law. But of course we're seeing more and more now in the mainstream reports that there's a cross-party agenda to drive through even more control of the media. Is it the law that's going to control it? Well, actually we think it's going to be the state itself, state control of the media. And if we come back to that original slide, why would the state want to control the media? Well, because it can cover up the paedophiles that are at high level.
Of course, the paedophiles, and of course we can say goodbye to reporting about MPs misappropriating expenses and all the rest of it. That would presumably be the other agenda.
So we just remind viewers, out of, I think it's 640 odd MPs, how many of those MPs, they've all been informed about Holly Gregg abuse, how many of them have responded?
To the best of my knowledge, and I have to say this is to the best of my knowledge because they may have responded to individual constituents without the constituents advising me, but at the present time it's around about 15.
Right.
Time,
So actually that's an increase on where it's been before. So how would you say that support for the Holly Gregg campaign is going at the moment?
I think on the basis that what we need is a proper inquiry, of course, into the whole, that not only the Holly Gregg case, but those related to it. I think now it's become very clear, and although the numbers seem quite small, I think that will increase quite soon with support from people within Westminster, because I think it's accepted now that Holly, of course, a competent and truthful witness, has identified her attackers, supported by expert medical documentary evidence,
and the police,
including from the police forensic medical officer, Dr. Francis Kelly, supported by the officer who was investigating, Dr. Ian Alley, Detective Inspector Ian Alley, supported by the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority, who decided the strength of the evidence was sufficient in order to award Holly a £13,500 as a result of being a victim of serious crime. So anyone can see there is no reason, no logical reason, no rational reason for the police not to even question any of the people named. Some of the people who perhaps may be opposed to this for whatever reason, the only logical reason for anybody to oppose this is if you take the stand, take the position that people accused of sexual offences should not be questioned by the police. People have a right to their opinion, but the people who have that opinion should not be surprised if people question their motives.
Well, because essentially it's turning common sense on its head, isn't it? That somebody, we exist, I thought, in a world where a crime is committed, the victim comes forward initially until it's proven, of course, it's an allegation, but they come forward and make a statement as to what's happened to them, and then it's the police's job to actually investigate.
Of course, and of course, taking that further, if the people who claim that they are innocent of the crimes alleged by Holly are actually, if that is what they feel, the police have let them down too, because if the police had conducted a proper investigation, which these days not only involves questioning, but normally access to the computers of people involved or alleged to have been involved in this type of crime, then obviously had the police not proceeded, having taken that action, they would effectively have been exonerated under the law, and it would have been irresponsible and unfair for me to carry on. I would not have done that. I would have accepted that. All I asked them to do was to question the people concerned.
Which was to do their job, essentially.
This they have failed to do over and over again. And I think the authorities now realise that this is irrefutable. There is no other, there's no possible excuse for the
and you've mentioned to me that the previous interview we did, where we showed documentation which was the irrefutable proof that, well, Holly is the key witness herself, which some people tend to forget, that she is the witness of fact. She's saying what happened to her. But aside from that, the reports from the police, the reports from the medical experts back that up. But you've indicated to me that the filmed discussion we had on that has made a difference to the way people are reacting.
Very much so. It's been very successful, and I think people should, perhaps it's worth mentioning that the film was made before the Savile situation came to the public domain. But even before Savile, we began to get very, very good responses from that film, because previous to that, people were often taking my word for it, and it was wonderful the number of people just took me at my word over this. But obviously I felt it right to be able to show people the evidence, to show that what I was telling was the truth, and that my actions were reasonable based on the documentary evidence placed before me.
Yeah, but well, that's absolutely fantastic, and we're glad to hear that. But it's quite frightening that we seem to be, well, are we drifting, or we're being pushed into a society where it's not enough that you make a statement, somebody stabbed me, somebody kicked me, somebody raped me. You can't actually get away with that. You've got to come with additional evidence. You can't just say, I was there, this is what was done to me, and that starts a process. Yes. We're now getting to the point, well, it doesn't matter what you say as a person.
Well, that is true, but I think we have to look at this in the context of the people who Holly made the allegations about. And I think the only possible reason for the inaction of Grampian Police is the status of some of those named, which included a senior police officer, a judge, and a head teacher, amongst other professionals.
Okay.
That is the only reason I can possibly conclude, and if anybody has another idea, I'd be very happy to hear it, the only possible reason for the failure to investigate.
So your implication is that if they're dirty old men in raincoats on the streets, they would have been picked up pretty quickly.
Yes.
But if we move into a different strata of the elite, the establishment, all of a sudden a different set of rules apply.
Indeed. Nobody would have heard about this if that at all. Well, they might have heard about it, but they certainly wouldn't know about me, and it would have been unnecessary for me to take the actions that I took. Yeah.
Well, that's led us on very nicely, because if we just delve a little bit more into Leveson, one of the things that we've picked up here in the column is we started to look at the people who were brought forward in order to give evidence. And I couldn't resist, this is actually taken July the 7th, 2011, but it's Julia Middleton's thoughts on leadership. And she's highlighting Chris Bryant, Max Mosley, John Prescott, Norman Fowler and Hugh Grant as people who are, well, you know, they should be rewarded for their bravery in speaking out. These are the quality of people that should be brought forward to give their opinion on the media. We just highlight the small text, but I assure you that's what we're looking at on screen. I'm not sure what the relevance of the dog's bottom is, but maybe that's a secret code there. We just put those names down so that we know who was in the bracket there. There's one more to come, I think, and Hugh Grant. And we're simply saying, are these really the people that we should be bringing forward to decide what gets into the media or not? Or is it the case these people are being used because of the way they think and behave? Is there something deeper going on here? Well, this is a little sequence of photos that we've had a tremendous response from. This is the independent reporting on the Sun, and the accusation from an MP, and that's Chris Bryant, is that the Sun made illegal payments to US servicemen to obtain a picture of Saddam. And if we just see exactly what he said, Chris Bryant told the House of Commons on Monday night that the Sun newspaper paid a substantial sum for the picture of the Iraqi dictator in his underpants while he was an American prisoner of war. And Chris Bryant, Leveson witness, common purpose leader, said that this was disgraceful and it showed more disgraceful behaviour by the press.
Mr. Bryant.
Well done, Mr. Bryant. So we were able to get hold of a copy of the Sun's front page, remembering now, of course, that Saddam is dead, but here he was in his underpants. And then we thought it appropriate to compare this with one of Britain's finest MPs, Mr. Chris Bryant. And here's Mr. Chris Bryant.
No.
And it's unbelievable, isn't it? It is unbelievable. Well, somebody said to us, essentially, where are we? Are they the same pants? Now, we're making light here.
Yes.
We're putting a little bit of humour into an unbelievably dark subject. But this is the quality of the people that we've got inside Parliament at the moment, who are being used to make decisions about how we investigate and prosecute child abuse cases. And of course, if we stick with Mr. Bryant, many people will never have seen that it was his Labour, his agent, that was jailed, I think, for 7 years for 12,000 pictures. Some of it was the most serious child pornography that had ever been seen, images of sadism, bestiality and child porn. So I think we've got a picture of the gentleman here, Stephen Carnell. So we've got Chris Bryant, who's prepared to photograph himself in his underpants.
Yes.
He's prepared to, well, we were going to presume he didn't really understand what his agent was doing. But then this man is brought forward into the public domain in order to talk about how the press comments.
Well, I think so, and I think it's fair to say that someone with a less dubious or controversial past might have been put forward to talk to the Leveson inquiry than Mr. Bryant.
Yeah,
that is, I think,
unless the objective of the Leveson inquiry is to actually turn common sense on its head. And
well, one could argue that, yes.
We could, couldn't we? So we'll have a quick look at Hugh Grant here, because of course he is another person that's been used not only as a Leveson witness, but as a common purpose promoted person via the Hacked Off campaign. And we've done this before, but it's relevant to what we're talking about here. What did this man get up to in his private life? Well, he was caught in the back of a taxi cab with this young lady. This is the quality of the people brought forward to, you know.
Absolutely impeccable lifestyle.
Impeccable.
Yes.
And we went in a different direction. This is another Leveson witness here, Professor Julian Petley. Now he has been used by the Hacked Off campaign, promoted by Hacked Off. We spoke to him actually because he'd been attacking the Daily Mail, and we asked him if he had any factual information to undermine the Daily Mail's article exposing Common Purpose, and he said he didn't. Well, not in front of him when he wrote the article, but he quoted the Guardian reports, and when we said, well, the Guardian of course was helping to fund the Media Standards Trust, he put the phone down.
Oh, really? Yes.
But the key thing about this gentleman is here he is promoted by Hacked Off, and this is what he was talking on at Bournemouth University. He was a special guest. We just highlight his name so there's no mistake. But he was a special guest talking about snuff movies and how these are a cultural mythology, the implication being that there is no such thing as people genuinely being murdered, and that the only films made are in fact shock horror films. Whereas when I'm going to say we talk to people who really understand what happens to child victims, aside from serious sexual assault, we have people talking about children being murdered.
Well, I'm sure that Lord Leveson was very impressed by these paragons of virtue.
Well, it's extraordinary, isn't it? When you put it together like this and you say, well, what's going on? We've got the BBC that can harbour Jimmy Savile over many, many years. Nobody took any notice when people were saying something was wrong. We've now got an investigation in 2012, and what does it say? Well, there was a bit of muddle and confusion, but we certainly didn't know that there was any problems.
No, exactly.
Yeah, it's difficult to swallow, isn't it, really?
It is.
So what about north of the border? I believe at one stage you made contact with Mr. Salmon.
Yes, I did, yes. Mr. Salmon, actually in 2007, was writing letters to Anne Gregg about the case and doing nothing about it. But I made sure, I wrote to him as well, and several times as well, and on the 1st of May 2011 in Perth, while the BBC were filming, incidentally, I handed the documents to Mr. Salmon myself, and Mr. Salmon took them off me. He says, I'll have a look at those. I said, thank you, Mr. Salmon.
Well, we can just show you that. We've got a bit of a cheeky slide here to do with Alex Salmon, just so we know who we're talking about. So this is the letter which we can expand a bit for you. We took the mickey a little bit by saying that he was a bit of a wet fish, but I think it's more serious than that, because he is not assisted in the Holly Gregg case at all. But we know, of course, that he was informed, so there was no, no getting away with it at all.
No, he's seen the same evidence that I've seen.
Okay, right. I'm just going to slip over something that's cropped up here we don't need. Have you actually had any assistance by anybody north of the border?
Not amongst the authorities, no. there have been a few brave journalists who've, of course, been excellent.
Right. But there are some of the more serious legal blogs that are actually reporting on what's going on.
Yes, it is very fair. There have been some very good people, and I could name The Firm, The Drum, The Scottish Law Reporter, all excellent, genuine people who really care about their country and want to see justice. And
they are picking up not only on the wider child abuse issue, but they're also picking up on the Holly Gregg case, and they've also been I think can call up a picture of her in due course, but they have actually been pointing out there's still no truth over whether Eilish Angelini was using public money in order to run the gagging orders which he tried against the UK column, and of course she's trying against you, I believe.
That, very much so. There's a citation against me. It exists at the present time. I've applied for legal aid in order to challenge this, but I've been refused twice now and will be trying again. Right. But quite clearly, they don't want me to take on Mrs. Angelini. Mm-hmm. I should say, as regards the payment that was referred to in the Drums article on the 17th of December, that the Freedom of Information Commissioner actually wrote to Mrs. Angelini to ask how the payment was made, the payment made to Levy and McRae in order to gag the Scottish press over the Holly Gregg case. Yeah. And I do have a document to say that the letter from the Freedom of Information Commissioner dated 17th of November 2010 was not answered until the 6th of May 2011. Right. Now what's significant about the 6th of May is that Mrs. Angelini left office on the 5th of May 2011. Right.
And I don't think we're going to be able to call it up actually, but I think I'm correct in saying that Levy and McRae, having been involved in all this murky business around Holly Gregg, is now being chosen to help support a campaign by Mr. Salmon to gag the Scottish press.
Indeed. So on Salmon's committee to advise him, we have Professor Peter Watson, give him his proper title, Professor Peter Watson, who is self-proclaimed specialist in suppression. Right. So Mr. Salmon has got to get advice on someone who...
So if you've done something naughty or you've got a problem with your image, he's the man you go to, and he sorts it out for you.
If you're a prominent figure, and I understand he's quite an expensive lawyer, if you're well-known and you have some dark secret, Mr. Watson is the man, Professor Watson, sorry, Professor, is the man you would go to. And he would sort you out. And he's been pretty effective at doing that, I have to say. But is he a suitable person to be advising the
gagging of press and media in Scotland? Well, of course, if you wanted a close down, presumably he would be the right person.
Well, yes.
And it's curious that it's going on north of the border while we got it going on at the south of the border. We just run through some things very quickly, but if we talk about British politicians, you said 15 had actually shown an interest. But we've pointed a finger at one or two of them, and we're going to keep doing that. This is Francis Maude, of course, very senior figure in the Cabinet Office. Why are we so interested in this man? Well, we're interested in him because of his close relationship with Common Purpose. And I believe in a telephone conversation you were told that he was certainly quite friendly with Julia Middleton, Chief Executive.
We have a letter that we have seen, which is a very friendly letter from Mrs. Middleton to Ms. Middleton to Mr. Maude, in which she said, "Dear Francis," and ended up with "Love, Julia." Yeah. She couldn't spell Mr. Maude's first name correctly, I have to say. But it was an affectionate little letter, which we have a copy of.
It was an email.
Email, that's right. Yeah. So I tried to ring Miss Middleton to find out about what her relationship with this eminent Conservative politician was. And the reply I got, I didn't speak to Miss Middleton, but a personal assistant, Elizabeth Crawford, told me that, oh yes, they've been friends for years, they're really good friends, and all the rest of it. Yeah. So there we go.
Okay, so we know they're close, and we're leading up to something of this, but the key point here was that this is this was minutes from a cabinet meeting where Sir David Bell was present, and they then awarded. We're talking about awarding contracts to Common Purpose.
Not Sir David Bell of Common Purpose.
Indeed, head of trustees. And basically they amended the minutes. So the first time they went out, they said that item 7 was running workshops with the top 200 and the Common Purpose medal was proposed. Committee members agreed to consider the costs. And the reality was that the item had originally said Helen Ghosh proposed running a number of workshops for the top 200 under the common purpose model. Helen Ghosh and David Bell agreed to consider the cost. Well, David Bell was there in his position with common purpose. So instead of standing aside while a decision was made, he actually helped award his own charity a contract, it would appear.
Yeah, and did he advise Lord Leveson of this?
Well, no, he didn't.
Ah, right. He didn't, yes.
And here is the letter from Francis Moore to your good self, dated the 31st of October 2011. Dear Mr. Green, thank you for your letter of 19th of October regarding my contact with Common Purpose and asking if one of my meetings with Julia Middleton occurred when she met me together with Sir David Bell to discuss contracts with the Common Purpose. I do not recollect such a meeting. So he's definitely got a little bit of a memory lapse there.
And lost his diaries perhaps as well.
And yeah, similar memory lapses seem to go on around a lot of the child abuse cases the moment they're brought up to similar politicians.
He goes on a little bit, doesn't he? He does make another sentence after that, I think.
Yeah, I cannot say definitely that it did not happen, but I have no recollection of such a meeting. Yeah.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Moore.
Yeah, thank you indeed. So if we just say, well, we're interested in poking our nose into Common Purpose, here, of course, we're highlighting links with Sir Bob Kerslake, Permanent Secretary, Alan Smith, Head of Global Risk Strategy, HSBC, but then we're getting to people like John Williams, World News Editor, BBC. We've got some other BBC people down at the bottom. So we know that Common Purpose is intertwined in the BBC. And this is the key problem, that we also know that there have been paedophiles using the Common Purpose networks to do their business. This was a guy up in Scotland called James Rennie. This is a little excerpt from his, this is an internal Common Purpose 360 thing. So this was a paedophile.
Yes.
And in fact, his details stayed up internally well after the time that he'd actually been picked up. So no screening of Common Purpose people going into schools. And then we come to very, very interesting pictures like this. So we've got James Rennie, Common Purpose man on the left. But on the right, we've got Matthew Burns, who was not only Common Purpose, he was helping sit on the board to choose other Common Purpose people. And he was not only a vicious sadist, but he's eventually imprisoned for really, really unpleasant offences.
There's nothing like having friends in high places.
Indeed. Yeah. And of course here in the centre we've got an unfortunate picture of David Cameron congratulating Matthew Byrne. So what we're really pointing out here at the moment is we don't know who the politicians are we're dealing with. And if we run through fairly quickly on this, we've had Harriet Harman getting upset because she said, well, the ministers are prioritising the web giants over children by allowing online porn. This is what she says: ministers have caved into pressure from internet giants and put their interests ahead of child protection. There was another article here: children pore over sexual images. Their parents watch Downton in the next room, yet ministers do nothing. So this is an upstanding member of Parliament, of course, Labour Party now. The only trouble is that when you look into her background, she was the person who was trying to water down and relax a variety of rules, and we've got them in the text here. She called on ministers originally to make sexually explicit photographs of films of children legal unless there were evidence that they'd been harmed. At the time she made it, she was a senior figure in Liberty, National Council for Civil Liberties. She wanted the age of consent to be lowered to 14, and she wanted incest to be decriminalised. So this is the quality of politicians.
It didn't stop her getting to number 2 position in the Labour Party, did it?
Indeed. Well, maybe these are the qualities that's required.
Absolutely.
So there's no mistake. Here she is in her younger days, and at the time she was working for the National Council for Civil Liberties and actually signed the letter. They were linked up with the Paedophile Information Exchange and Paedophile Action for Liberty. And there was another Labour MP, former MP now, Patricia Hewitt, so she was also involved in the same organisation. So what we're really saying is that when we start to take the lid off Parliament, we're finding some very unsavoury characters, never mind the likes of Cyril Smith,
yes,
and other people which we know accusations have been made.
Certainly.
Is it any wonder they don't want to get the lid off Holly Gregg case?
It is no wonder at all.
No.
Not at all.
And judges, of course, help the whole process by gagging anybody that actually tries to speak out. So in the box on the right, this is an actual statement from a gagging order, which was made available to us, but I believe it's a gagging order. The injunction restrains any person from publishing in any national newspaper, handbill, poster or pamphlet, etc., 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 details of the children, social workers, or publishing any summary of this gagging order. So anything to do with the abuse of children is so secret that we can't even report that there's been a gagging order put in place.
Yes. Now, who would want to impose conditions like that? What would be the reason for that, Brian?
Well, I think on a simple line, it will be somebody that wants to conceal a crime.
I would think that's a reasonable supposition, actually. It's something I would tend to agree with. I suspect many of the viewers might be led in that direction as well.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible that an organisation as big as the BBC could actually be controlled with enough force and accuracy to keep the lid on paedophile activity in high places?
Well, I think all the indications are that it is.
Yeah.
It has been for a long time. And we see nothing, even now in December 2012, to dispel that opinion.
Right.
Nothing.
If we end on a positive note, what would you say people, how would you say people are reacting now to the Holly Gregg story? Do you think it's now making progress and people
Yes.
want to see a resolution, they want to see a proper inquiry into it?
I think so. I think as a result, really, of the Savile case, I have to say, it's opened people's eyes to the fact that this is going on. Before, I think there were people who perhaps looked at it and thought, perhaps they didn't want to hear about it because this is a horrible topic, it really is. Or they thought it was too fantastic.
Yeah.
They're not saying that anymore.
No.
I think people accept that something terrible has happened, and it follows a pattern. That is important. It is not just Holly Gregg. Holly Gregg is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, because as the BBC correctly identified, north of the border, disabled children, in particular Down syndrome children, are favoured by paedophiles because they, in general, make unreliable witnesses or can make unreliable witnesses.
Unlike Holly.
Unlike Holly.
Who is a competent, truthful witness. And because of their gifts with memory, a Down syndrome witness is just about the most accurate one that you can possibly have. And they don't have a disposition to lie at all either. They, that is from the experts, of course. I'm not qualified to do that. I just go on the expert advice that has been placed before me and has been placed before the police, I have to say. Yeah.
So as we end this programme in 2012, we're going to say, for those of you who are working in... Okay, well, welcome back into the studio. We've just got a little bit over a minute to go. Well, I think you will agree with me that the interview with Mick, Harby and Mr. Coles, this tragic case of this elderly gentleman who's prevented from seeing his wife, is just extraordinary. We hope that listeners and viewers will stay with us as we try and do something to help Mr. Coles. I can tell you that whilst the interview there with Robert Green was going on, I actually made a call to Ben Bradshaw's office to see what he had to say. I was unable to speak to his staff, but they said that Mr. Bradshaw had been working for 4 years to try and do something to help Mr. Coles, but he was hampered by the fact that the matter had gone through the court. So we're waiting now to see what he's actually doing at the moment, and we'll keep you posted. If we're going to do something to improve our country and sort it out, we need to understand the sheer scale of the fraud and the corruption and the criminality which is now endemic, not only within Parliament but within the public sector. To deal with it, we need to understand it and expose it. So I hope you join us tomorrow for our last UK column news at 12 o'clock, and after that we'll be breaking to the 7th of January. So thanks for joining us. Goodbye.